Since the beginning of this year, not just the calendar that is at fast pace, events across the world, particularly in Nigeria, had also been moving, in a rapid succession, from the issues surrounding the increase in electricity tariff to insecurity, and then dealing with the real issues of the second wave of COVID-19. People are asking for questions, asking for answers, seeking solutions to all of these issues. And right at this interview, we have someone who will help us make sense of some of these things that are confronting everyday living. And I have the Executive Director of Social and Economic Rights Center, Felix Morka, with us on the program today. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Good evening. Thank you.
Right, first let's begin with, it's more like a surprise to many, because after 5 years of being in power, President Muhammadu Buhari has retained same set of people, but people had agitated and demanded for a reorganization of the country's security architecture. Just recently, the president brought in or announced a replacement of the service chiefs. What's your reaction to this, first of all?
Well, I think like most Nigerians, I was also surprised that the, just outgone service chiefs were being replaced by new, individuals. Now, even though it's been long in coming, I think, that Nigerians have welcomed the idea of actually, bringing in a new team to run the security system because of the many challenges that have arisen over the last, in fact, even throughout the life of this administration and before this government was installed. I think that it's a good thing that we have new people, even though all of them have been in the system. They're all generals who have participated in one way or the other in the war against, Boko Haram and the insurgency and banditry around the country. But now that they have the mandate to head these respective agencies, I think Nigerians are hoping that hopefully they bring some new creative ideas into this war.
If I ask you, just in a nutshell, to set an agenda for them, what would you advise that they focus on? There are several issues while they, improving the infrastructure of the military and even the welfare of the soldiers and officers and men that are involved in these engagements. What would you advise them to focus on as the priority?
The first thing they focus on, in my view, is the men and the women who are under their command. It's clear that the Nigerian security forces are not the best motivated group of fighters we have in the world. After the announcement came down, you could see both rank and file in the Navy, in the Army, literally celebrating the announcement of the removal of their service chiefs. Now, usually that's not something you get, because for some it's routine to change command, especially when you're not a beneficiary of any sort of authority in that system. But the fact that these men and women were, ecstatic to hear the announcement, I think, tells a whole lot about their state of mind and their state of motivation. So I would advise the new service chiefs to focus on, first of all, reassuring these soldiers in all of the services that they are valued and that they're probably the best investment Nigeria can make in the war against terror and against banditry. So figuring out a way to actually get them to feel that energy and the support that they require from those commands, I think is critical to any prospect of success.
Okay, over the years, successive governments had tried to improve the state of internal security, but it appeared to have defied most of the approaches or solutions or remedies that were thrown at it. But there is one remedy that many people may not have paid attention to, and that is the nexus between poverty or unemployment and insecurity. Do you see any connection between these two lines or these two issues? First of all, let's begin with that.
Well, fact is that there's widespread insecurity in the country. I mean, it's almost mind-boggling now how we even got here. Everywhere you look, you find serious challenges. I mean, traveling through the country's highways now is like a frightening proposition. Along Benin or a road, there was recorded incidents of kidnapping by alleged, bandits and headsmen, whoever they may be. But the fact is that our highways are so unsafe. Our neighborhoods are not safer either. So, anyhow you look at it, people have seriously, I think, converted crime to economic, engagements. So people are making a living out of it, building economies out of kidnapping, for example. I mean, just the other day there was a huge, conversation about the economy of kidnapping. The fact that, a huge volume of money is now actually, paid out as ransom. And so people are engaging in it now, not just because they have, criminal tendencies, but because it's become highly lucrative. So much so that even the state or elements of the state participate in paying ransom, rather than building the architecture to stop these crimes. We are participating in supporting the criminal enterprise, providing them the resources to buy more weapons and to get more sophisticated and get more bold and audacious against security system.
What would you think someone whose family or relation is in captivity, without any certain hope of being freed, when the person is asked to part with some thousands of naira, do you think that person wouldn't jump at that just to secure the release of the individual?
Naturally. The tendency of every human being is to save their loved one, no matter the cost, even if you have to sell a property to make the ransom so your loved one can come home. That's a natural tendency. But it becomes a bit disturbing when the state and the security system, the police and other agencies become participants in the delivery of ransom without a corresponding vigorous effort to, in fact, solve those crimes. That's when we're emboldened, because the bandits have become so bold and so audacious that they even kidnap, members of the security system who ought to be protecting the ordinary people. So my point is that it's an economy now, and the problem has gotten more, gotten deeper, and it requires now more sensible, very aggressive, approach to solving it.
Okay, well, the assumption, it remains an assumption that security agencies also pay ransom, because they have not come out to admit that. So we keep it at that, at the level of what people think that happened. But if I may ask, what would you recommend, definite steps you would recommend to bridge that gap or to thin out that pool of raw materials, that is the jobless hands that are easily drawn into crime, in different ways? What would be your recommendation to make that pool dry?
Before coming to that specific question, I think that what makes crime flourish is the idea, the knowledge that you can actually commit a crime and get away with it. The lack of certainty that if you do crime, you will be caught and then hopefully punished is what deters crime. It's not necessarily the severity of punishment. There are those in any society who are predisposed to crime, who just do crime because that's who they are. But yes, there are those now who see crime and criminality in this country as a way of life, as a way to earn a living. Now, I think that's where the very embarrassing figure of unemployment in this country, comes to bear. Because, people are struggling, even with the best, intention, even with the best efforts. A ridiculous number of our people, our young people, are unemployed. They're unemployed not just because, government work is not available or because the private sector is not, flourishing and, thriving as it should to, create more economic opportunities. It's also the way we've organized our, economic system. Have you gone to a bank, if you are not somebody with, a huge name or with a massive, asset base to ask for a loan of just 2 million naira. My point is that the entire economic system is oriented to create poverty.
Paint a picture of frustration, at a certain level, in the country. And such frustration also is being experienced by a lot of people who are struggling now to register in the National Identification Scheme. Many people wonder why there are too many biometric capturing processes here and there, driver's license, in the bank, electoral process. There are too many registration systems or platforms. Can you recommend, or do you think that having a harmonized platform where individuals and citizens could be identified, just one identification, could be more valuable than different registrations that we're having now? Because government says that they need all of these to improve security.
Quite frankly, I see the entire system as completely chaotic, uncoordinated, and just wasting a lot of time, energy, resources, creating and recreating these platforms. Now, for those who have actually done the national ID registration, the information they ask for is not that different from what the telecoms have demanded for SIM registration, that almost everyone now who has a SIM card or has a telephone has gone through. It's not that different. Now, the National ID card project itself is another white elephant project that we have been on for a very long time. Now, who is talking about all of the funds that were lost, siphoned, through that project? Who is discussing it? What is the percentage of Nigerians who have actually, been captured in that system? How come, all of a sudden, after the NSAS protests, government came out with this, fire brigade, demand that everyone who is a subscriber actually, register to be identified?
The registration of citizens had been on for years, but at each point, it's met with some controversies and maybe just jettisoned to start another one, later. So I don't think, are you really not making a mistake thinking that it was just because of the NSAS that government came up with the registration issue?
Point that this is a long-standing project. Like you said, we have had a lot of false starts. Those false starts are also significantly related to allegations of corruption and abuse by public officers who were entrusted with the task of building that system. My point is, I do not know of anyone who is in jail for those false starts, especially the aspects that had to do with improper use or corruption of public funds, because we are paying the price now. So the government now is, we're fighting the second wave of COVID, and the government is insisting that everyone who has, a telephone line or who intends to acquire a phone line must, go register. And look at the chaos that we're witnessing at these registration centers. Now, first of all, this is not the time for that policy, for the demand and the setting of deadlines. This is the wrong time to do that. I think it's a policy mistake. No matter the merits of the argument for that system to be developed, I think that it is absolutely ill-timed, and the government needs to suspend this process until we have had a total handle on the spread of COVID.
Okay, well, the National Bureau of Statistics latest, one of their latest reports say that about 40% of Nigerian population live below poverty line, and that poverty line for them is pegged at about 137,000 naira per annum, income per individual. If you break it down further, you would know what it looks like. It's even below what we have as the minimum wage, and this is quite incredible, in terms of poverty rate. But government also had created some intervention programs to meet people, provide funds and make life easier for the people. How effective do you think all these government programs have been in addressing the issue of poverty?
Poverty in Nigeria is regrettable. A country with the kind of resources that's available to us shouldn't have anything close to those levels of poverty that we're discussing. 40% is ridiculous. I mean, that's nearly half, of the country that we're talking about who live below the poverty line. And even at that, the people who are in this bracket are also, exposed to other levels of deprivations, whether it's access to, potable water, access to, good housing, access to education or, electricity. Many of them live in the urban areas, at least, live in some of the, informal settlements that, dot some of our cities in Lagos. We have nearly over 110, such, settlements. The point is that some of the palliative, policies, social investment programs, that this government has put in place, they're okay. But I don't know what 5,000 naira will do for anyone who requires 137,000 naira to actually live a year at a minimum to be just on the threshold of the poverty line. My point is that it's a little too little to make any real meaningful impact. What I think government has done, some of the programs where they're in fact providing assets, resources, training, micro-enterprise support, those are probably more sustainable and more impactful compared to some of the cash handouts which this government is giving out. In the short term, people take it, whatever they do with it, they do. But it has nothing to do with bringing out the poverty or ameliorating the conditions in which people live.
Okay, what realistic measures would you recommend? Because when you look at the situation where the people that even have jobs, what they earn at the end of the month is not even enough to take them home, yet we call it take-home pay. The situation is looking so worrisome, and the population is increasing in a manner that suggests that if nothing realistic is done, the poverty rate or ratio will not get better. What would you recommend realistic steps and measures to address or bridge this gap?
The problem of income disparity is real and it's huge. Those who live below the poverty line are there because they lack access either to employment or to income or to resources to affect their own livability. Now, just access to employment alone is virtually impossible. Even when government is hiring, those decisions are not made on the basis of, merit or competence or those who really need the job. In many cases, they are, given to those who may not either merit it or who may not, in fact, need those jobs. What you have, therefore, is that the civil service is barely recruiting across this country. The public sector is, at a standstill. The private sector is a different conversation. Now, increasingly, the private sector is moving in the direction of, competent, sourcing. People want to hire people who have experience and who are well trained. Even Nigerian graduates today, in many employment settings, have to compete with, graduates who are trained, elsewhere, outside the country, and who are, often preferred by employers. The point is that, government needs to mobilize resources. Like I said, you must create access to, soft capital for people to actually, build their own businesses. If you go to Computer Village employs more people than the entire Lagos State, civil service bureaucracy. But that's because, those people who are there are able to actually mobilize their own funds and, get involved in some sort of, business activity. I think that the government needs to convert a lot of the funds right now that they're doling out as cash, offers to citizens, to consolidate them into some sort of cooperative funding that will, I think, begin to create structures and assets for small scale startups in the country. I think that's really where Nigerians are headed, where the government will make the most impact, other than simply just waiting for an advert in the papers to apply and get a job that actually doesn't exist. Many young people are looking out to either relocate, which is another problem on the economy itself, because we're losing some of our best talents, our best minds in the process, whereas those who remain are struggling just to make sense of their own circumstance.
Okay, the last time we had an interview, we sat a bit closer than this, and this is because of the realities that everyone is trying to stay safe from the ravaging pandemic. Nigeria is not exempted from this, and we're having our own experiences internally, where over in the news you hear stories of people purchasing the certificate that they are negative, or they are safe, or they are free from the virus. All of these are things that had made the war against the pandemic in Nigeria a bit more of a concern. We're talking about importation of vaccine, and a lot of people are expressing worries over how that will be done transparently to go across, to reach the people everywhere in the country. What's your thought about how government should address this issue of COVID, at this time, to have a more realistic result?
Outcome. No, I think government needs to be consistent. So far, we haven't been consistent in the policy to combat the spread of COVID. I'll give you an example. Just today, the papers had it that the federal civil servants have been ordered to actually work from home. For those who are below grade level 12. Yes, for those who are below grade level 12. But the same federal government, and the same policy, by the way, is enforced in states like Lagos, and I think a couple of other states. Now, I don't understand the basis of the policy that makes it okay for civil servants, at least a certain category of civil servants, to work from home so that government can, have better control of the spread of COVID, while at the same time, opening our schools and having, students, pupils, and their teachers actually go to school. I find that to be highly contradictory, in policy, because if you think that there's some benefit, if you've made that judgment that keeping some category of civil servants at home, helps to reduce the spread or the velocity of the spread of COVID, then I don't see why it's okay to send teachers and students, back to school. Consistency is one thing. Second is that, this country now thrives on vices. People literally sell anything and sell everything. It won't surprise me if the vaccines that are yet to be officially, brought into the country are already being marketed and sold in this country.
Oh, now that has won already.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's my point. My point is that we're a bit too reticent. We're a bit too laid back as a people. Security system, government system is a bit too loose, unfortunately, which is why in many establishments, the security man at the gate, whether it's the mall or businesses or companies or even government buildings, the security folks at the gate will not hesitate to remind you to wear your mask. But as soon as you walk into the building, everybody else has their faces completely uncovered. No one wears a mask. How do we do that? If we say masks are useful, as I think the world has established, we must then be consistent in insisting that people wear masks in public places, especially in crowded rooms or halls or indoor settings. That is what is required. In countries, police are authorized to issue tickets and penalize those who don't wear masks. Now, if you make that the case in Nigeria, if you empower the police to do that, of course, some will argue that the police will simply exploit it to, again, cash in. Question is that this country, socially, politically, economically, we are at an advanced stage of, the kind of challenge that can actually cause a government to get drastic in rolling out measures and in enforcing measures that will hold, I think, the center, or we are in fact, gravitating towards the brink of social crisis.
Would you suggest or recommend those stringent measures by government to hold the center, as you put it? Is it what you will be recommending in this current situation?
I think that the government needs to look at itself and heal itself, because a huge part of the problem is the government and those who are in government. The government of this country at all levels needs to really, rise up to the challenge of leadership. Many of them who are in government don't quite fully understand the seriousness of the responsibility that they bear. And I think that Nigerians are also not demanding enough. I think that's ultimately everything we've discussed, from the economy to COVID. Nigerians are not making enough demand. I'm not talking about people grumbling about how things are not working, whether it's unemployment, whether it's just lack of access to opportunities in this country, or even the issue of crime. Nigerians have yet to, escalate the demand for performance on the side of government, which is why we're where we are.
Okay, well, that's a nice place to end it, and we appreciate you sharing your time and your experience with us on this interview.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And to you that watched, it's our pleasure that you did. Keep watching. Thank you.